Hey everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of our special 2022 LinkedIn Live series. I'm Park Rappel, one of the co-founders of Scholars. Our entire goal is to help early career recruiting teams automate their candidate experiences to drive engagement and increase retention. Hence why we're hosting this 2022 LinkedIn Live series to do and talk about all things early career candidate experience. This week's topic, we're going to be covering the four key areas of an early career candidate's experience. Again, check out our LinkedIn, go to our website, drop questions in the comments as I'm talking on the show today to make sure that I'm doing my part and bringing all of the learnings and findings that we're learning in the industry to you all through these videos. All these videos, before I jump in, if you missed the live one, I always post them on my LinkedIn. I also always throw them up on our hirescholars.com website. So make sure to go check those out if you have questions, want to see what we've talked about on previous shows as well. So with that, let's dive in to this week's topic, which is the four key areas for an early career candidate's experience. Now, this may seem simple, but it's really not that simple. So we've been getting a ton of questions about the definition of candidate experience for early career candidates. And one of the biggest sticking points is an understanding of when that candidate experience actually begins. Too often, I think employers are delivering standard communication, and the conception is that the candidate experience begins once they have accepted an offer, maybe once they have applied to an opportunity at your company. We're going to challenge that idea and say that that candidate experience actually starts the first time that they engage with your employer brand when they are a freshman in college, maybe a sophomore in college. So with that and that thought process in mind of how are we redefining the timing and the definition of early career candidate experience, we're going to cover today four of the early areas in an early career candidate's experience that we recommend you all conceptualize and break out differently and separately from a strategic standpoint to ensure that you are working your team strategy towards being able to adhere to obviously current generation of candidates requests is a nice word to say it, but also ensuring that the timing of that experience that you're delivering is on point and ultimately driving your retention. So the first kind of area of this candidate experience is that kind of pre-application timeframe. I think that ultimately this idea that if someone hasn't applied, their candidate experience doesn't matter is what's leading towards poor retention rates. This is the first area that we really urge companies to strategize on their candidate experience for. Is this time freshman, sophomore, junior pre-application before they apply to a role? From a strategic standpoint, to really make sure that you're addressing this area in a key way, break it out by grad year. This will allow you to separate your strategy based on how long until that candidate is actually able to apply. Freshman, very different than sophomore, very different than the junior who should be applying to our roles, obviously. But this is when I think that in this phrase, war for talent, truly begins and is what makes the best early career recruiting teams stand out from the pack, is that they understand that as early as pre-application is when that experience that we start to deliver to them should be strategized. We should be sharing relevant information with candidates, even if they're not able to apply to our open positions. If you can track this area's data based on breaking it out on grad year, how candidates are progressing and engaging with that information that you're sharing with them, you'll be able to start to understand not only trends in general with what candidates are kind of gravitating towards, but internal trends for your team to understand for our current freshmen, what should we be communicating with them about in their sophomore year? Think about how impactful that story and the data you can tell is going to be. in this kind of pre-application area, which is, again, I think, redefining the timing for early career candidate experience, which I think is really important. The second key area in this early career candidate experience is obviously the interview process. In this area, I think there's a couple things that we should be thinking about. How easy is this process for the candidate? How transparent are we being in this process? Is this process that we're running right for the type of role that the requisition that the candidate applied for? Is it differentiated based on that persona? And how well are we preparing candidates to be successful in these interviews, whether we offer them the job or not? Obviously, companies, there's a ton of time and effort put into your interview processes. But I think that this area, for those teams, and I apologize, for those teams that haven't thought about their candidate experience pre-accepted offer, you should be. Because regardless of how these interviews goes, if you can keep those questions that we just ran through during the interview process in mind, you will trend towards a positive candidate experience, regardless of if you give them an offer or if you don't. I think something to think about during this kind of area of the candidate's experience is candidates are really going to ask themselves, regardless of the outcome, how did this process go for me versus other ones that I have been through? And then did this company provide me with tools to be successful, or did I feel like I was siloed in this process? It's always important, again, and it's what I want to do, to bring that candidate's mindset into these conversations in the interview process. That's what candidates are going to think about. They're going to compare you to other interviews that they've done. And they're going to think about how prepared they were versus not, to be successful in that interview process as well. So food for thought, interview process is the second kind of key area that I would strive for companies to really kind of conceptualize as it relates to your candidate experience, kind of holistic strategy, and where you could be doing better from a personalization standpoint, consistency, and delivery and automation standpoint as well. The third area I want to cover is that kind of post interview process time frame. So post offer acceptance versus post offer declines. Two things that are completely different. They should have two different paths and journeys for that candidate that they should be following. And I think that this is a lost distinction. It's not enough to just decline someone and throw them back into an email list. After they've gone through that interview process, we've declined them. They are on a different level than someone who is just sitting in our talent community email list. So what are we doing to differentiate the strategy and the communication and the experience that they're getting that's going to want to make them just stay engaged with our brand for any sort of future opportunity, regardless if it's 1 year, 3 years, 5 years down the line. I think that the candidate, after they've accepted an offer, during your Keep Warm strategy, is going to ask themselves really how prepared do they feel for their first day on the job, which is a good thing to keep in mind. That's that kind of one bucket of this key area in post-interview process. Now, the second one is that post-interview process decline students. This really is the lost segment, I believe, in the early career candidate experience. How are you engaging juniors and seniors after you've declined them? How have you analyzed the sentiment of those individuals after you've declined their offer, to ask them for feedback, ask them how often, if they would like to be communicated with from your company, even though you didn't extend an offer to them? And if so, what would they be looking for? Do you have data to show you for people who you didn't extend an offer to? Do you have data to show you what those people are interested in, how often they want to be communicated with, and do you not? And if you don't, why not? Think about that. That data is extremely important, because as we think about kind of the lost piece of this early career candidate experience, we probably may want a junior to come back as a senior to work for our company. The candidate in this kind of decline time period, obviously, they're not going to be thrilled, but they're going to ask themselves, how did the company handle telling me that they weren't going to extend me an offer? did they call me or did they just send me a blanket email that looked like it was unpersonalized? And was my process leading up to this, was I able to give my best shot? Did I feel like I wasn't given enough information or preparation time? So food for thought, that third key area, post interview, and that's either post offer acceptance, keep warm strategy, or post offer declined, separate keep warm strategy. The fourth and final one that I want to highlight is kind of intern program management. Lots of companies do this really well. Not a huge surprise here, but where I think that teams fall short is a lack of iteration during the internship program based on feedback that you're receiving. So I think the most glaring example that I can show of this, which is an area for improvement that I would just kind of want to throw out there to the universe, is if you host an event the first week of your internship program, you get feedback and it was average. There were things that could have been done better. Are you taking that feedback and applying it to the next event that you're hosting, even though that event is already planned and scheduled and everything like that? Or are you just going forth with that event? I think that candidates, if they're willing to give you feedback, they're looking for your team to take that feedback, just like we always tell candidates to take feedback for their career during the interview process and use that to put themselves in a better position. How is your team during that internship program, during this area, taking the feedback that you're getting from your candidates and applying it to their candidate experience? The one thing that I wanted to point out in this area that I think makes a huge impact from the candidate's perspective, to be able to see their feedback go to light, but also will even put them in a position to want to give your team more feedback during that internship program, which I think is extremely important. If you keep all four of these kind of areas in mind, I would say it will help as we look towards this kind of redefinition of an early career candidate experience. I think that with this mindset shift, we'll start to see a positive trend in engagement and increased retention that will help teams at the end of the day. All in all, on this kind of topic, I'm super excited. Our event in April is going to be April 20th on a Wednesday, 12 p.m. Central. We're going to have 3 awesome early career panelists and have it moderated by an awesome moderator, which I'll be announcing here shortly on LinkedIn. The topic of the webinar is going to be the definition of early career candidate experience, exactly what we talked about on today's show. But coming from your peers and your leaders, I'll be dropping the registration link in the comments. Make sure, obviously, to check that out. And with that, once again, I'm Parker Pell, one of the co-founders of Scholars. Our goal is to bring these conversations and these ideas and your all's questions to the forefront and make sure that we're doing our part in helping everyone kind of truly understand and transform how you think about early career candidate experience. DM me if you want to come on the LinkedIn Live, if you have questions that you want us to cover, and check out all the links in the bottom right down there. Thanks, everyone.